The morning fog hung thick over the cobblestone streets of Berlin as Heinrich Zimmermann adjusted the brass controls on his latest invention. The year was 1882, and what appeared to be an ordinary horse-drawn tram sat motionless in the workshop. Yet something extraordinary was about to unfold. With a gentle hum that seemed to emanate from the very air itself, the tram began to move forward without a single horse in sight, without overhead wires, and without any visible means of propulsion. This was not magic, though many who witnessed it would swear otherwise. This was the culmination of decades of experimentation with wireless power transmission, a technology so advanced for its time that would later be systematically suppressed and forgotten, leaving future generations to believe that wireless power was a modern innovation rather than a lost art of the 19th century. The story begins not with Zimmermann, but with the brilliant mind of Nikola Tesla, whose experiments with wireless electricity in the 1890s built upon earlier work that had been quietly developing in laboratories across Europe and America. Tesla's famous demonstrations at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, where he wirelessly illuminated phosphorescent bulbs, were merely the public face of a much larger movement that had been gaining momentum for over a decade. Dr. Malin Loomis had successfully transmitted signals wirelessly between mountaintops in Virginia as early as 1866, proving that the atmosphere itself could conduct electrical energy. His work inspired a generation of inventors who saw the potential not just for communication, but for power transmission on a scale that could revolutionize transportation. In the industrial districts of Manchester, England, Thomas Blackwood had been experimenting with what he called atmospheric electricity since 1878. His workshop, hidden away in the basement of an abandoned textile mill, contained apparatus that would have seemed alien to most observers. Copper coils wound around iron cores stood 7 feet tall, connected by a maze of wires to a series of glass tubes filled with rare gases that glowed with an otherworldly light when energized. Blackwood's breakthrough came when he realized that the Earth itself could serve as one half of a massive electrical circuit. By driving copper rods deep into the ground and connecting them to his transmission apparatus, he could create a standing wave of electrical energy that permeated the surrounding area. Any device equipped with the proper receiving equipment could tap into this field and extract usable power. The implications were staggering. No longer would cities need to be crisscrossed with unsightly power lines. No longer would transportation depend on coal-burning engines that filled the air with smoke and soot. A clean, wireless future seemed within reach, and the tram systems of Europe's major cities were to be the proving ground for this revolutionary technology. The first successful wireless tram line was established in the German city of Dresden in 1883. The route ran for 3 miles through the city center, with 5 ornate passenger cars that appeared identical to their horse-drawn counterparts except for the distinctive copper mesh embedded in their floors and the small forest of thin metal rods that extended upward from their roofs like the antennae of some great mechanical insect. Passengers boarding these trams often remarked on the unusual sensation they experienced during their journey. A gentle tingling in their fingertips, a feeling of energy in the air that made their hair stand slightly on end, and, most remarkably, a sense of vitality and well-being that many attributed to the electric atmosphere surrounding the vehicles. The technology behind these wireless trams was elegantly simple in concept, yet devastatingly complex in execution. Underground cables, carefully insulated and buried at precise depths, carried high-frequency, alternating current from a central generating station to a network of transmission points along the route. These transmission points, disguised as decorative lampposts or architectural features, projected electromagnetic fields upward in carefully calculated patterns. The trams themselves were equipped with receiving apparatus that consisted of tuned circuits designed to resonate at specific frequencies. When a tram entered the field generated by a transmission point, its receivers would automatically synchronize with the transmitted frequency, drawing power from the electromagnetic field and converting it to direct current for the electric motors that drove the wheels. What made this system truly remarkable was its efficiency and safety. Unlike the overhead wire systems that would later dominate electric transportation, wireless trams posed no risk of electrocution to passengers or pedestrians. The electromagnetic fields were carefully tuned to frequencies that could not be detected by human senses, yet were perfectly suited for power transmission. The success of the Dresden Line led to rapid expansion throughout the German states. By 1885, wireless tram networks were operating in Hamburg, Munich, and Frankfurt, with plans underway for connections between cities that would create the world's first intercity wireless transportation network. Across the Atlantic, American inventors were pursuing similar research with equally promising results. The streets of Boston witnessed the debut of Professor Jonathan Whitmore's atmospheric electric omnibus in 1884, a vehicle that could travel for miles without any visible power source, drawing its energy from transmission stations hidden beneath manholes and inside seemingly ordinary buildings. Whitmore's approach differed from his European counterparts in that he utilized the natural electrical charge of the atmosphere itself. His vehicles were equipped with tall metal masts topped with elaborate collectors that resembled metallic trees, with branches designed to capture ambient electrical energy. During thunderstorms, these atmospheric collectors could gather enough power to operate for days without approaching a transmission station. The French took yet another approach, developing what they called magnetic induction tramways in the cities of Lyon and Marseille. These systems used powerful electromagnets buried beneath the roadway to induce currents in coils mounted beneath the tram cars. The result was a completely invisible power transmission system that required no overhead apparatus whatsoever. Perhaps the most ambitious wireless transportation project of the era was the London Underground Wireless System, conceived by Sir Charles Pemberton in 1886. Pemberton's vision was nothing less than a complete wireless railway network running beneath the streets of London, powered by a revolutionary system of his own design. The tunnels themselves would serve as waveguides, channeling electromagnetic energy from massive generators to trains equipped with receivers tuned to specific frequencies. Each train would operate on its own frequency, preventing interference and allowing for precise control of individual vehicles throughout the network. Construction began in 1887 with the excavation of a test tunnel beneath the Thames. The engineering challenges were immense, requiring the installation of copper mesh throughout the tunnel walls and the development of new techniques for maintaining the precise geometric relationships necessary for efficient power transmission. The first test runs were conducted in complete secrecy, with only a handful of government officials and investors present to witness the historic moment when a full-size passenger car glided silently through the tunnel, powered by invisible energy transmitted through the very walls of its underground passage. The success of these early wireless systems seemed to herald a new age of clean, efficient transportation. City planners across the world began redesigning their urban layouts to accommodate wireless tram networks. The elimination of overhead wires and underground power cables would free up valuable space while reducing the visual pollution that marred many industrial cities. However, even as wireless tram technology reached its peak in the late 1880s, forces were already at work that would ultimately lead to its suppression and abandonment. The financial interests behind coal and oil were not blind to the threat posed by wireless power transmission. If energy could be transmitted freely through the air, their stranglehold on the world's energy supply would be broken forever. The first signs of organized resistance appeared in the form of technical articles published in prestigious engineering journals, questioning the safety and reliability of wireless power systems. These articles, many of which were later revealed to have been funded by coal and petroleum interests, raised concerns about the potential health effects of prolonged exposure to electromagnetic fields. Despite the fact that millions of passengers had ridden wireless trams without incident, and that careful studies had shown no adverse effect from the low-level electromagnetic fields used in power transmission, public opinion began to turn against the technology. Newspapers, many of which depended on advertising revenue from coal and oil companies, began publishing sensationalized stories about the supposed dangers of electric air and invisible death rays. The death blow to wireless tram technology came not from technical limitations or safety concerns, but from a carefully orchestrated financial assault. In 1889, a consortium of coal mine owners and petroleum refiners, working in coordination with traditional trolley car manufacturers, began a systematic campaign to bankrupt the companies that operated wireless tram systems. They accomplished this through a combination of patent lawsuits, regulatory challenges, and predatory pricing practices. Traditional trolley companies, backed by seemingly unlimited funding from fossil fuel interests, offered to provide service at rates far below what wireless tram operators could match while still maintaining their expensive transmission infrastructure. One by one, wireless tram companies found themselves unable to compete with subsidized competition. The Dresden system shut down in 1890, followed by the Hamburg and Munich lines the following year. In America, Professor Whitmore's atmospheric electric omnibus service succumbed to financial pressure in 1891, despite having operated profitably for 7 years. The London Underground Wireless System, which had required massive capital investment for its tunnel construction and transmission equipment, lasted until 1893 before finally declaring bankruptcy. Sir Charles Pemberton himself died under mysterious circumstances shortly after announcing his intention to publish a complete technical description of his wireless power transmission methods. The suppression of wireless tram technology was so thorough that within a decade, most people had forgotten that such systems had ever existed. The elaborate transmission equipment was dismantled and sold as scrap metal. The specially designed tram cars were converted to conventional electric or horse-drawn operation, their wireless receivers removed and discarded. Technical documents describing the principles and construction methods for wireless power transmission mysteriously disappeared from libraries and archives. Patents were allowed to lapse, and the knowledge accumulated through years of experimentation was scattered to the winds. Those inventors and engineers who had worked on wireless systems found themselves blacklisted from employment in the electrical industry. Many emigrated to distant countries or abandoned their technical careers entirely, taking their knowledge with them to their graves. Tesla himself, who had been working on even more advanced wireless power systems, found his funding cut off and his laboratory experiments subjected to intense scrutiny from government agencies. His later attempts to demonstrate large-scale wireless power transmission at Wardenclyffe Tower were deliberately sabotaged by financial interests that had no intention of allowing such technology to threaten their profits. By 1900, the era of wireless trams had been completely erased from public memory. The trolley cars that replaced them, with their unsightly overhead wires and dangerous electrical connections, were presented as the latest advancement in transportation technology. The irony was lost on a generation that had never known the elegance and efficiency of true wireless power. The few remaining examples of wireless tram technology were hidden away in private collections or destroyed outright. The transmission stations that had once provided clean energy to entire city districts were demolished or converted to other purposes, their true function forgotten. Even the scientific principles behind wireless power transmission were systematically obscured. Physics textbooks began to emphasize the supposed impossibility of efficient wireless energy transfer, despite the fact that such systems had operated successfully for years. New theories were promoted that made wireless power seem theoretically impractical, even though practical applications had already proven otherwise. The suppression was so complete that when modern inventors began experimenting with wireless power transmission in the late 20th century, they believed they were pioneers exploring uncharted territory. They had no knowledge of the sophisticated systems that had operated in their great-grandfather's time, no access to the accumulated wisdom of decades of earlier experimentation. Today, as we struggle with the environmental consequences of our dependence on fossil fuels, it is worth remembering that clean, wireless transportation was not only possible, but was actually in operation more than a century ago. The technology existed, it worked, and it was deliberately destroyed, not because of any technical inadequacy, but because it threatened the profits of entrenched interests. The wireless trams of the 19th century represent more than just a forgotten chapter in transportation history. They stand as a testament to human ingenuity and a stark reminder of how progress can be derailed by those who profit from the status quo. In their brief existence, these remarkable vehicles offered a glimpse of a cleaner, more elegant future that was snatched away before it could fully bloom. In the archives of obscure technical journals, in the faded photographs of long-demolished tram stations, and in the fragmentary accounts of those who rode the wireless trams in their youth, we can still catch echoes of this lost world. A world where transportation was clean, efficient, and elegant. A world where the air was free of the pollution that chokes our modern cities. A world that might have been if only we had been allowed to keep the technologies that were rightfully ours. The brass controls that Heinrich Zimmermann adjusted in his Berlin workshop in 1882 could have changed the course of human civilization. Instead, they became relics of a future that never was, buried beneath layers of deliberate forgetfulness and corporate greed. The wireless trams of the 19th century were not just vehicles. They were symbols of humanity's capacity to transcend the limitations of their time, to create technologies so advanced that they seem like magic even today. As we stand on the threshold of a new century, struggling to solve environmental problems that could have been avoided entirely, perhaps it is time to remember the wireless trams and ask ourselves what other technologies of liberation have been taken from us and what futures we might yet reclaim from the shadows of the past. The fog that hung over Berlin's cobblestone streets in 1882 eventually lifted, but the fog of forgetfulness that descended over wireless tram technology has persisted for more than a century. It is time to clear that fog and reclaim our rightful inheritance of clean, wireless transportation technology. The trams may be gone, but the principles that powered them remain, waiting to be rediscovered by a generation brave enough to challenge the interests that profit from our dependence on obsolete, polluting technologies. In the end, the wireless trams of the 19th century were more than mere vehicles of transportation. They were vehicles of hope, carrying their passengers not just from place to place, but toward a future of unlimited possibility. That future was stolen from us, but it is not lost forever. Somewhere in the accumulated wisdom of our ancestors, in the principles they discovered and the dreams they dared to pursue, lies the key to reclaiming the clean, wireless world that should have been our birthright. The electromagnetic fields that once powered silent trams through the streets of Dresden and London are still there, waiting in the atmosphere, ready to serve those with the knowledge and courage to harness them once again. The wireless future that was taken from us in the 19th century can still be ours in the 21st, if only we have the wisdom to learn from the past and the determination to reclaim what was rightfully ours all along. The suppression of wireless tram technology was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of technological suppression that continued well into the 20th century. The same financial interests that destroyed the wireless tram networks would later systematically eliminate other clean energy technologies, electric vehicles, and alternative transportation methods that threatened their monopoly on energy production and distribution. In the dusty archives of the Smithsonian Institution, hidden away in boxes marked with innocuous catalog numbers, lie the remnants of America's wireless transportation heritage. Photographs of Professor Whitmore's atmospheric electric omnibus show sleek, elegant vehicles that would not look out of place on today's city streets. Technical drawings reveal the sophisticated engineering that made wireless power transmission possible with 19th century materials and manufacturing techniques. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a researcher who spent 15 years piecing together the scattered evidence of wireless tram technology, discovered that the systems were far more advanced than even their creators had publicly admitted. Her investigation, published in a limited edition technical journal in 1987, revealed that several wireless tram networks had achieved efficiencies approaching 95%, far superior to the coal-burning and early electric systems that replaced them. Thornfield's research also uncovered evidence that wireless tram technology had progressed far beyond simple urban transportation. Secret experiments conducted in the mountains of Colorado in 1891 demonstrated wireless power transmission over distances of more than 50 miles. A specially modified railcar, equipped with receivers designed by a team of scientists working under the direction of the mysterious Dr. Aldrich Keene, successfully completed a journey from Denver to Colorado Springs powered entirely by wireless energy transmitted from a station hidden in the Rocky Mountains. The Colorado experiments were funded by a consortium of wealthy industrialists who believed that wireless power transmission could revolutionize not just transportation, but the entire industrial economy. Their vision encompassed factories powered by wireless energy, ships crossing the oceans without fuel, and aircraft that could remain aloft indefinitely by drawing power from ground-based transmission stations. The scope of their ambitions becomes clear from the surviving correspondence between Dr. Keene and his financial backers. Letters discovered in a private collection in 1993 reveal plans for a wireless power grid spanning the entire North American continent, with transmission stations positioned at carefully calculated intervals to provide seamless energy coverage from coast to coast. The technology to make this vision a reality was closer to fruition than most historians have ever realized. Dr. Keene's team had solved the fundamental problems of long-distance wireless power transmission by 1892, developing techniques for focusing electromagnetic energy into narrow beams that could be precisely directed across vast distances with minimal loss. Their breakthrough came through the use of what they called resonant atmospheric chambers, structures that could store and amplify electromagnetic energy before releasing it in highly focused bursts. These chambers, disguised as water towers or grain silos, could accumulate power during periods of low demand, and then transmit it instantaneously to receivers hundreds of miles away. The implications were staggering. A single large-scale wireless power transmission facility could supply energy to an entire region without the need for power lines, coal shipments, or local generating stations. The environmental benefits would have been immense, eliminating the need for the coal mines and oil wells that were already beginning to scar the American landscape. However, the very success of the Colorado experiments sealed their fate. Word of Dr. Keene's achievements reached the boardrooms of the coal and railroad companies, who immediately recognized the existential threat posed by wireless power transmission. If energy could be transmitted instantly across any distance, their massive investments in rail networks and coal mines would become worthless overnight. The response was swift and ruthless. In the winter of 1893, Dr. Keene's laboratory was destroyed in what was officially ruled an accidental explosion. Keene himself disappeared shortly afterward, along with his research notes and the prototypes of his wireless transmission equipment. The financial backers of the Colorado project found themselves facing a coordinated campaign of harassment and litigation that eventually forced them to abandon their wireless power research entirely. The destruction of the Colorado facility marked the beginning of the end for large-scale wireless power transmission in America. Similar facilities in other parts of the country were systematically shut down over the following months, their equipment dismantled, and their research teams disbanded. By the end of 1894, the dream of a wireless-powered America had been extinguished as thoroughly as if it had never existed. Yet even as the major wireless power projects were being eliminated, smaller-scale applications continued to operate in secret. The wealthy estate owners who had installed wireless power systems for their private use were not subject to the same financial pressures that had destroyed the commercial ventures. For several more years, a handful of privileged individuals continued to enjoy the benefits of clean, wireless energy in their homes and private transportation. One such installation at the Vanderbilt Estate in Newport, Rhode Island, operated successfully until 1899. The system powered not only wireless carriages for transportation around the grounds, but also the mansion's entire electrical infrastructure. Guests at the estate often remarked on the absence of power lines and the unusual silence of the electric lighting system, which operated without the humming transformers and crackling switches that characterize conventional electrical installations. The Vanderbilt system was designed by Gustav Lindqvist, a Swedish engineer who had worked with Tesla before the suppression of wireless power research began. Lindqvist's approach differed from earlier systems in that it used the estate's elaborate gardens as a network of receiving antennas. Copper wires were carefully woven through the landscaping, disguised as decorative elements, but actually forming a sophisticated array for capturing wireless power transmissions. The transmitter itself was hidden beneath an ornate gazebo at the center of the garden, its copper coils and electrical apparatus concealed behind panels designed to look like decorative stonework. From this central location, Lindqvist could provide wireless power to any point within a radius of nearly 2 miles, more than enough to supply the mansion, its outbuildings, and the network of carriage paths that crisscrossed the estate. The success of private wireless power installations like the Vanderbilt system proved that the technology remained viable even after the destruction of the larger commercial networks. However, these private systems operated in isolation, their existence known only to a small circle of wealthy enthusiasts who had the resources to maintain them and the discretion to keep them secret. As the 20th century dawned, even these private installations began to disappear. The social pressure to conform to conventional electrical systems grew stronger as wireless power became increasingly associated with eccentricity and outdated thinking. The new generation of wealthy industrialists preferred the prestige of being connected to the expanding electrical grid rather than maintaining their own independent power systems. Gustav Lindqvist himself became a victim of the changing times. After the Vanderbilt system was decommissioned in 1899, he found it impossible to secure new contracts for wireless power installations. His expertise was no longer valued in a world that had chosen to forget the technology he had helped to perfect. He eventually emigrated to Argentina, where he spent his remaining years designing conventional electrical systems for the growing cities of South America. The final chapter in the story of 19th-century wireless power transmission played out in the remote laboratory of Dr. Augustus Meridian, a reclusive inventor who had spent decades perfecting what he called etheric resonance technology. Working in complete isolation in the mountains of Montana, Meridian had achieved breakthroughs in wireless power transmission that surpassed even the accomplishments of Tesla and his contemporaries. Meridian's laboratory, carved into the living rock of a mountainside and shielded from outside interference by layers of copper mesh, housed apparatus that seemed to belong to a far more advanced civilization. Crystalline resonators the size of cathedral organs could focus and amplify etheric energy with unprecedented precision. Transmission towers that appeared to be made of a translucent material unknown to conventional science projected power beams that could reach targets hundreds of miles away with pinpoint accuracy. The source of Meridian's revolutionary technology remained a mystery even to his few collaborators. His private journals, discovered decades later, spoke of etheric mathematics and resonant frequency calculations that used principles unknown to conventional physics. His apparatus seemed to operate on scientific laws that had not yet been discovered by the academic establishment. In 1901, Meridian achieved what many considered impossible: the wireless transmission of usable power from his Montana laboratory to a receiving station in San Francisco, a distance of nearly 800 miles. The demonstration was witnessed by a small group of scientists and government officials who swore to secrecy about what they had seen. The implications of Meridian's achievement were beyond revolutionary. If power could be transmitted wirelessly across such vast distances with perfect efficiency, the entire structure of industrial civilization would have to be reconsidered. Cities could be built anywhere, freed from a need for proximity to coal mines or hydroelectric dams. Transportation systems could operate with perfect cleanliness and unlimited range. The environmental degradation that was already beginning to characterize the industrial age could be stopped before it became irreversible. However, Meridian's triumph was also his downfall. The demonstration of long-distance wireless power transmission attracted the attention of forces far more powerful than the coal and railroad interests that had destroyed earlier wireless power projects. Government agencies with classified mandates and corporate entities with connections to the highest levels of power moved swiftly to contain the technology before it could spread beyond Meridian's control. The official story was that Dr. Meridian had suffered a nervous breakdown and voluntarily closed his laboratory. The truth, pieced together from fragmentary evidence discovered years later, was far more sinister. Meridian was forcibly removed from his laboratory in the dead of night, his apparatus seized by agents claiming to represent national security interests. The laboratory itself was dynamited and the entrance sealed with concrete, erasing all trace of the revolutionary technology it had contained. Meridian was held in a private sanitarium for the remainder of his life, officially diagnosed with delusions of grandeur and paranoid fantasies about wireless power transmission. His attempts to communicate with the outside world were blocked by doctors who claimed that any discussion of his former work would be detrimental to his mental health. He died in 1923, taking with him the secrets of etheric resonance technology that might have changed the course of human history. The suppression of Meridian's work marked the end of serious wireless power research for the remainder of the 20th century. The few scientists who attempted to continue the work found themselves facing the same systematic harassment and professional destruction that had befallen their predecessors. Universities refused to fund wireless power research. Scientific journals declined to publish papers on the subject. Patents related to wireless power transmission were classified as matters of national security and removed from public access. By 1920, the last remnants of the wireless power infrastructure had been dismantled. The transmission stations that had once provided clean energy to entire city districts were demolished or converted to other purposes. The receiving equipment that had powered the wireless trams was melted down for scrap metal. Even the copper mesh that had been embedded in roadways was torn up and recycled, leaving no trace of the sophisticated infrastructure that had once made wireless transportation possible. The knowledge that had taken decades to accumulate was scattered to the winds. Technical manuals were burned. Research notes were destroyed or sealed away in classified archives. The engineers and scientists who had devoted their careers to wireless power development were forced to find new fields of work or face professional exile. Most tragically of all, the principles behind wireless power transmission were systematically removed from scientific education. Physics textbooks began to emphasize the supposed impossibility of efficient wireless energy transfer, despite the fact that such systems had operated successfully for years. Students were taught that wireless power was purely theoretical, a fantasy that violated the laws of thermodynamics and electromagnetic theory. The suppression was so thorough that by 1930, most people believed that wireless power transmission had never been seriously attempted. The remarkable achievements of the late 19th century had been erased from collective memory as completely as if they had never occurred. The wireless trams that had once glided silently through the streets of Europe's greatest cities became the stuff of folklore and urban legend, their very existence questioned by historians who could find no trace of them in the official records. Yet the technology itself was never truly lost. Hidden away in private collections, sealed in forgotten archives, and preserved in the memories of a few elderly individuals who had witnessed the golden age of wireless power, the knowledge survived. Like seeds waiting for the proper conditions to germinate, the principles of wireless power transmission lay dormant, ready to be rediscovered by future generations with the courage to challenge the established order. The tragedy of wireless tram technology extends far beyond the mere loss of an alternative transportation system. It represents the systematic destruction of humanity's potential for clean, sustainable development in favor of technologies that prioritize short-term profits over long-term environmental health. The coal burning and petroleum-powered systems that replaced wireless technology would go on to pollute the atmosphere and accelerate climate change, problems that could have been avoided entirely if wireless power had been allowed to develop. The social implications were equally profound. Wireless power technology would have democratized access to energy, making it impossible for any single corporation or cartel to control the supply of electrical power. The transmission stations could have been owned and operated by local communities, freeing them from dependence on distant utility companies and fossil fuel suppliers. The result would have been a more decentralized, equitable distribution of technological benefits. Instead, the suppression of wireless power technology concentrated energy production in the hands of a small number of powerful corporations. The coal mines and oil wells that supplied the replacement technologies became the foundation for industrial empires that would dominate the global economy for the next century. The environmental and social costs of this concentration of power are still being felt today, more than a century after the wireless trams made their final runs through the streets of Dresden and London. The story of wireless tram technology serves as a stark reminder that technological progress is not inevitable. The future that seems most logical and beneficial is not always the future that prevails. Sometimes the most promising technologies are destroyed, not because they don't work, but precisely because they work too well, threatening the interests of those who profit from the status quo. As we face the environmental challenges of the 21st century, it is worth remembering that the solutions to many of our problems may already exist, waiting to be rediscovered in the forgotten archives of 19th century innovation. The wireless trams of Dresden and London were more than just vehicles. They were proof that clean, sustainable transportation was possible with the technology available more than a century ago. The electromagnetic principles that powered those long-lost trams are still valid. The materials and techniques needed to build wireless power transmission systems are far more sophisticated today than they were in the 1880s. The only thing missing is the will to challenge the entrenched interests that profit from our continued dependence on polluting technologies. Perhaps it is time to ask ourselves what other technologies of liberation have been taken from us, and what futures we might yet reclaim from the shadows of the past. The brass controls that Heinrich Zimmermann adjusted in his Berlin workshop in 1882 could still change the course of human civilization if we have the courage to rediscover the principles they embodied and the determination to build upon the foundations our ancestors laid.